If you're hearing this, you've once again tuned into the Consequence of Habit podcast. My next guest absolutely blew me away. I'm on here yapping about trying to be a better person. This guy's trying to save the planet, right? He's taking it to a whole nother level. You know, we talk about being part of something bigger than ourselves. Well, this guy completely embodies that. He's a polar explorer. He's an author. He's the first man to walk to both the North and South Pole. But what's so great is he also talks about some of the struggles personally that he's gone through along the way. Amazing story. Guy's a little intimidating. I'm going to be honest. You know, you're just hearing the audio, but I'm looking at him face to face, and that's through video. And I felt myself kind of shrinking in my chair. But with that said, I'm gonna get this one started. Please welcome Mr. Robert Swan. Mr. Robert Swan, I appreciate you very much for you joining us here today. This is actually a huge honor to have you sit down with us. It means a lot to us. In preparing for this, I was coming up with things to say on how to introduce you, and I found that I was afraid I was going to butcher it, and I was going to butcher what you're actually trying to do and what your motivation is. So, if you could please introduce yourself and tell us what 2041 is about, and what your motivation behind your work is.
Well, JT, great to be on board. It's fairly simple, really. I think one of the things I've learned in life is that we tend to make things more complicated than they are. And that might be personally, or it could be for the planet, or it could be the present circumstances that our world faces. I had a dream when I was 11, watched the film, wanted to become the first person to walk to the North Pole and then the South Pole. Let's be honest, the first person stupid enough to do that. And that dream took a lot of putting together. It was a huge battle. But at the end of it, I felt a bit lost. As we all know, to achieve something often leaves you rather empty. And I was helped by an extraordinary man, Jacques Cousteau from France, a terrific man, an environmental guy. And he gave me 30 years ago a 50-year mission to help preserve Antarctica, the only place in the world we all own. And in the year 2041, only 21 years from now, after 30 years so far of trying to make that happen, we as a world will decide whether we have the sense to leave one place alone on Earth as a natural reserve land for science and peace, Antarctica. And I think that people 10,000 years from now would appreciate that we did have the courage to leave one place. And we've been working on that for a long time, and we're closing in on it. And I do believe that it's possible to achieve because no one owns Antarctica. It's the only place in the world we all own. So I'm hopeful, I'm positive, and that's what we're working towards.
It's interesting you say that, because when I had heard you in another video and I had read that the fact that Antarctica is not owned, and that being a positive, and that kind of struck me at first, because I in my head I was thinking, because it's not owned, there's not maybe the right governing body to be able to stand their ground and say, no, this is not happening. Why is it the fact that it's not owned a benefit?
Well, because if you think of the Arctic at the north, you have Russia, Canada, the USA, all actually owning, as part of their sovereign nations, parts of the Arctic. So to be blunt, the Russians can say, well, it's our territory, we can do what the hell we want. Or the Canadians can, or the Americans can. So the fact that it's not owned by anybody, Antarctica, I believe is very positive, for the simple reason that the world, the entire planet, every nation on Earth can stand up, whether they're interested in exploiting Antarctica or not, and stand up and say, hey, it's all of ours, get your hands off it. So I believe that it's slightly tough because there's no body that owns Antarctica, but my view is we all own it. So if we all stand up and say, get your hands off it and leave it alone, maybe there's hope. But what's important is that's not enough. And what I've spent the last 30 years doing is trying to promote the use of renewable energy, JT, because if we're using more renewable energy in the real world, it won't make financial sense to go and exploit Antarctica. So there has to be, if you like, a moral reason to preserve it, but also there must be a financial reason, because money makes the world go round. And if it's not worth going there, who's going to go and do it? So put those two together, and I hope that, well, I do actually more. I more than hope. I believe that we can succeed.
Yeah, that's, it's the process of what you've done. You mentioned at age 11, you were motivated to do something. Now, there's lots of people at young ages that are motivated to do something. And I think we're skipping over a bunch of the things that you've done to help bring attention to what your cause is. I'm interested in the beginning. So at 11, you decide, hey, I'm going to make, this is what, at 11, I wanted to be a lot of things. And few people find a passion specifically at that age and are able to follow through. If you could just kind of walk me through what that looked like.
Well, I think it depends where you are and who you are. And I was really lucky to be number 7 in a family. Wow. So being the youngest, my elder brother, if he talked about doing anything, everybody would have said no. By the time I came along, everybody just said, whatever, just get on with it, do it. Yeah. No one was focused. So I was extremely lucky to have that attitude. And I was extremely lucky to have 4 brothers and 2 sisters who were behind me to do what I was doing. So to walk you through it in simple terms, I had the dream. I held on to that dream, which I think is a really important part of this, not let it go. And at the age of 22, 23, after university, I realized, inspired by my brothers and sisters who said, Rob, if you're going to do this, you need to do it. Because if you don't, it'll never happen. Other things will come into your life. You'll get married, you'll get a job, and all these things. Do it now. And that was really important. So at the age of 22, 23, I committed myself and said to myself, I'm doing this. Had no idea that it would take 7 years of life to raise $5 million US, which was a stat load of money 30 odd years ago. And it's a stat load of money today. And I made that commitment. And I think that was the key to it, to make the commitment come hell or high that it was happening. And to raise that sort of money when you're a nobody was an absolute nightmare. But I think that commitment to say this is happening was the only way it could happen. There was you couldn't have another job. You couldn't do 2 things. And I think that one of the biggest things that I often say to people who might ask me, that if you really want to do something, it's really hard to do 2 things at the same time. And especially like an expedition. So you say, well, I'll do this other job, but you commit to doing it and your life becomes that thing. And you might have to sacrifice a lot. And imagine, I was 22, 23. All my friends were getting jobs, buying houses, buying cars, doing all these things. And I was living on a bicycle in an old warehouse in the East End of London, thinking, am I missing out on something here? But it was that determination to say it's going to happen, which actually is not that hard to do. A lot of people say, well, that must have been very difficult. It's not. If you make a commitment, it's not that hard, because you push everything else to one side and you keep it clear to keep going on it. And it was not easy. I would say it was the hardest thing to do, was to keep going to make it happen.
Yeah. I think a lot of things go into factor that. I think you're right. I think the age of the early 20s, before things like a mortgage and a wife and things like kids, because they'll change your trajectory very quickly. Was there a period during that where you were strongly doubting what you were doing, the direction you were going, and if so, what brought you back to what the end goal is going to be?
I think it goes across the board, and you're absolutely right. You might you might be getting a husband, you might be getting a girlfriend, boyfriend, all those things, a mortgage, buy a car, all those things. I had to push them to one side and just say, this is happening. And of course, there were terrible times. There still are terrible times. No one helps me except myself. I have to raise all the money to do all that we do. And guess what? During this time of COVID-19, my entire business has collapsed. Entire business, everything. I'm about to run out of money, and I'm 64 in a few weeks' time. Great. No savings, no insurance, nothing. I have no backup. And so therefore, I learned early on that you keep that goal in mind, and you push away all the things that could stop you. And you say to yourself, okay, yes, it's a dark time. Yes, it's going to be tough. And yes, I'm not raising any money. Yes, everybody's saying I can't do this. But actually, I look at the alternative and say to myself, well, actually, what would I be doing if I was doing something else? If I was an accountant or doing a respectable profession, I would probably not be very happy. So somehow in the chaos of doing the things that we've done, I have managed to say, well, actually, this is okay. It may not be that much fun sometimes, but it's okay. It suits me. I'm still in the ring. I'm still doing these things. And ride those upsets and keep it going.
I think, and I have a daughter who's 21. I've got 3 kids, but my oldest being 21. And the older I get, the more I realize that that's true freedom, right? To have something, a true passion, something you believe in, something that as a benefit is helping save the planet, and realize that it's not always going to be safe. Like, so I'm a government employee, and at first, you want your kids to be safe. You want them to say, hey, I want to make sure you've got a paycheck coming in every 2 weeks. You've got insurance. You've got these things. But there's something in life where we weren't meant to be safe all the time, right? I think as humans, we are meant to. What I'm getting at is you've lived a life of what I consider freedom, right? You've made your choices. You've made something. You've determined the direction that you're going.
Yeah, I have. But what I would say is that, I have a son, Barney, who's 25, and I felt the same thing. And I didn't push him to join what I do and be part of the expedition world. And he made that choice. And, I still think, oh, God, I wish that he had a proper job. Yes. Like my father said to me, Robert, when are you going to get a proper job, boy? Right. Of course, I understand that. And, of course, I've had to explain to him the ups and downs of freedom. Freedom does not come, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Right. There isn't. And freedom is not all it's cracked up to be. But it's worth striving for, and it doesn't have to be an entire kind of, throwing everything away and like saying, "Oh, that's cool, man. I'm really free." That's not what it's about. Freedom is to actually do the things that matter to you, that really matter to you, and that takes some engineering to do.
Yeah,
it doesn't just happen. I've spent my whole life working damn hard to be sitting here in California at the age of 63 and to be looking at my bank account and my entire worth is $2,000. I'm sitting in a house that I rent for $1,600 a month. I have a car that's almost older than my son. those are choices that I made to retain freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And it hurts.
Yeah.
It hurts.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people view freedom as being, wow, I'd really like that. Trust me, it's great, but it comes with a price, like anything. So I often think to myself, wow, I wish I had a government job, or I wish I had a stable income. I wish that I had a health plan. I wish I had all kinds of things that people have. I wish I had a beautiful car that I could lease for a few $100s a month and drive in something that's not falling to bits. Yeah. I wish. But I think the choices you make, you've got to be happy with in the end. And I have to say that I'm okay with the situation I'm in right now, because I'm going to come out of this stronger, better, healthier, fitter than I was before I went into it. So I'm not grumbling, but freedom comes with a price and security comes with a price. You've just got to assess that price and feel happy with it either way. Or if you're not happy, change it.
Yeah, and that can be the struggle. And I think you're right. I think there's something to be said about the security of a job. And I think we're kind of going off on a bit of a tangent here, but what I'm kind of striving here, and what I hear a lot of people say is, when no one else is around, when I'm by myself, how is it I feel about myself, right? So security doesn't give you that feeling of self-accomplishment. Well, I would say, to me, if I'm sitting there and I go, yeah, sure, I have a 401k and that's great, and I have health insurance and that's great, but that feeling of creating, of making, of building something on your own, it's got to just be, it's got to be amazing.
It is. Yes, it is. And it requires a huge effort. It requires the support of many people to make it happen. And it's quite exhausting. And also, JT, often it doesn't make you that happy because it's so hard. But my advice to people is that if they have a secure job, you know, if you look at what most people are doing now, a lot of people right now are extremely busy, not doing much.
Yes.
Right. And I actually found myself realizing that actually I'm quite a lazy person, which is not something that anybody that I've ever met would ever describe me as being a lazy person. But during this time of lockdown, I thought, wow, I'm quite a lazy person. But what I think what people tend to underestimate is how good people are at doing nothing. And how about saying, in order to feel a little better about your creativity, perhaps find some freedom within the barriers that you have, and paying the bills and having a job, all those things, that there is time to find some freedom in doing some other things. Yeah. And I definitely believe that. You don't have to end up having your whole life doing those things, but it's perfectly possible to find that within the 24 hours that we are given every day.
That's interesting.
I think.
So I want to get back to some of the things that you did to bring attention to your cause. They could be your trip to the North Pole, where it seems like to be what you said is some of the scariest moments of your life. Your trip to the South Pole, the amount of times you've gone back to Antarctica. If you could just give us an idea of some of the things that you've done.
I think that these things are enormous in their scope, and you have to walk pulling on your back 300 odd pounds on a sled, 9 hours a day, 7 days a week across an entire white continent, Antarctica. The temperature is going to fall to -40 in 70 days. You're going to lose 60 pounds in body weight. So it's not much fun. Trust me. I don't think I enjoyed anything doing that. I think what I learned, though, in that scale of enormity was that if you think about reaching the South Pole, you'll never get there. What you have to do is to knock it down, because it really is hard, into a day, an hour, a step even, and not think ever about getting to the pole. Out of 900 miles, maybe I allowed myself to think that we could possibly reach the pole 100 miles out. Before that, I would have gone insane if that's what I was thinking about.
Yeah.
So I think knocking things down into step by step in life is it makes even a tough time look a bit better. I think the other thing is that you talk about habits, right? I am not very well organized. I really am not. And if you're not very well organized in my business, you're going to die. So it doesn't quite fit being a completely disorganized human being that doesn't really give much about detail, going into a world that if you're not detailed and organized, you're not going to come home. So what I've learned to do in this enormity of scale and hardness and really hard is to make sure that I really, 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 during that period, as organized as I've ever been in my life. So I get the systems of preparation down 100%. And so on day one, I'm as organized as anybody else on the team. And as things progress, being me, it slightly goes downhill, but never enough to threaten my life or the safety of the team in any way at all. But trying to hold that discipline, I think it's so apt. What you're doing is it has to become a habit. It can't be like you wake up in the morning and think, oh God, I've got to be disciplined today, or I'm going to get frostbite, or I'm going to die, or if I don't eat, I'm going to collapse. It becomes a habit from almost incredibly before you wake up, lying in your sleeping bag, in your tent, you're thinking to yourself in the back of your mind, okay, let's run through it. Yeah. Let's run through what I've got to do per minute for the first 20 minutes of getting up. And people say to me, it's impossible to be so disciplined that you can go to the bathroom literally the same minute of every day. And I'm talking about taking your trousers down as a man, right? But you have to, because you have to get out of the tent exactly at the same time, stagger across some snow in blowing snow, take your trousers down, do your business, try not to get frostbite on your hands or your private parts, and get back into the tent to warm up so you don't get frostbite. And that has to happen at exactly the same time. So it all becomes habit, and a habit of not thinking about it. So everything with your gloves, how you wear your clothes, everything becomes a habit. And you're only aware that you're not doing it because something feels cold or something doesn't quite feel right. You're not thinking, I've got to do this, I've got to do this, I've got to do this. Now, coming back into the real world, I completely forget that mindset.
That was my next question, actually.
Because JT, I can't stand it. I'm not that sort of person. But I get through it because I make it a habit. When I come back, everything collapses. I don't give a hell. I don't care about anything. I'm not thinking about anything. I'm tired of it. Right. But what I'm able to do is I'm able to dive into that world of habit when I need to.
Yeah.
Because I think I'd possibly be even more boring than I am if I lived in that world of habit here.
Right.
I think people would die and sort of go, God, we can't, Rob, what a boring guy. I mean, he's one of those, anally retentive, whatever you want to call me. But when it's necessary for a mission, for the family, for an expedition, I can easily switch to saying, okay, right, get the piece of paper, get organized for JT this morning, do the job, get the habit, work it.
Yeah.
But that makes it a bit more interesting to be able to go in and out of this disciplined habit rather than living in it all the time, which I have to do at the South Pole.
Yeah, that's and that was my question. I think we're cut out of the same piece of wood when it comes to not being organized. I have a hard time with attention to detail. I can have grand visions, and this is one of the reasons that you would interest me so much was someone who's not organized. My experience is they have lots of grand plans. And it's the ability to make those things happen, because that takes attention to detail. And when you're talking about the environment you're in, where detail means life or death, and then everything else in life, it must be hard to even find that motivation, because it's like, hey man, I just came back from Antarctica, where if I didn't do this, I die. I don't do something here, I'm a couple of days late on a bill, or I didn't do my morning run, or something like that. So I find that very interesting, that the difference in those two.
To answer your question, I pick and choose, because I don't want to be that person that I am in a tent at -40 when I'm at home with my family and my friends. I don't want to be that person. Mm. I really don't. But what I do is I have a think about what's necessary, and I think what opportunity I have. Like, for example, you right now, I had a bit of a setback on my last expedition that I'll explain shortly, and that requires me getting stronger and fitter at the age of 63, 64 than I've ever been. Mm. This is absolutely necessary to complete a mission. And right now I'm thinking, okay, lockdown, COVID, bank account's gone, business is gone, I'm having to borrow some money off my family to keep going. That actually is fine. I'll ride that storm. We'll get over that. But I've got to use this time to be punching out some serious miles on my bike now, mm-hmm. and not be doing what I normally do, which is to travel around, rush around, and then come back home and think, right, I've got to do 100 miles tomorrow morning, which at my age is no good. So I'm taking the benefit of gradual, step-by-step, very disciplined training right now. So I'm bringing that into now. And it's necessary. And I'll tell you something about habit and discipline, which was really disappointing and a pain in the bum for me, literally. That I've always had this dream, JT, of crossing the whole of Antarctica on foot. Ever since I read the stories of Scott and Shackleton, the great explorers, and Shackleton, an Englishman, he had this dream to cross all of Antarctica on foot. And he never got to even start it because his ship got smashed up in 1914, 15, and he never even got to the shore journey. And always in the back of my mind that maybe one day I could have crossed all of Antarctica. Obviously not all in one go, which top class people have done, especially from Norway, but I would do it in pieces. So 2 years ago, I had 600 miles to go to finish that crossing of the Antarctic continent. Made a journey with my son. After 300 miles on foot, my hip disintegrated and I couldn't carry on. It was the worst time of my life because I failed in everything, but I'd never failed to get to the pole when I said I'd get there. Yeah. And that was a huge lesson for me to realize that failure, if you can alter your opinion on it, isn't actually that bad. And so it became my son Barney's success. The fact I couldn't finish it actually was not a bad thing because it meant I could celebrate his achievement on reaching the South Pole. Then, being me, I thought, okay, 300 miles to go now to the South Pole. I'm going to finish the job. So early this year, I went back to the South Pole to complete the 300 miles and decided on an entirely different approach. The leaders of my team were two of the top polar explorers in the world, Johanna and Katinka, two powerful women from Norway. It was fantastic to have them leading this expedition. And I was so disciplined. I got every habit. I got everything right. And 40 miles after 1,460 miles, 33 years of trying, 3 major expeditions to make it happen, discipline. Because I thought, I've done this. I'm 40 miles out. Slipped on the ice. My brand new artificial hip that I had put in to make the journey blew out of its socket, and that was it. 40 miles out. Now, that was because I lost focus. And for most people, they'd say, Rob, you've done this. It's over. You don't need to do this. But no, next year, when I'm 65, I will go back and I'll finish that journey. Now, I can't possibly do the 40 miles only because it'll be too expensive. So I'll probably have to do 100 miles to suit the air flight in and the cost of doing it. But I'm going back.
Yeah.
And I'll finish the journey. It won't matter for anybody, JT. No one.
Except you.
Except me.
Yeah.
And I think that one thing that's really important in life is that often people do so many things for so many reasons, and occasionally it's okay to do it for you.
Yeah. 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 You mentioned your trip with Barney and how, I watched the video on that, and I know you're short on time, so I want to get this in quick. I speak about ego on the podcast because I'm very interested in how our ego affects us. Either it can be in a positive way, it can be a negative way. And you had said to Barney, you were talking about death, right? About being scared. You said you should be scared. This is life or death. And not finishing is almost like, not completing is almost like that. And to see your face when you came in on those skis, it gave me chills, because you can see somebody who has given everything that they could possibly give. And it struck me for a couple different reasons. One, how do you bounce back from that? You're somebody who's achieved, from what I saw, achieved. Number two, when you were talking to Barney about life and death, you said, but I'm not going to let you die because I'm here. That had to be, there's a lot of things going on there. There's one, I've given everything I can give. Two, I'm not there to watch over the thing I'm at some point you feel like you're put on earth to watch over. Right. But then the pride of knowing I'm not the one who's going to do this, but I have a son who's going to go on to complete this, which if you're not going to do it is almost, in some ways, can almost be considered better. I mean, it's
absolutely.
You're passing it on, and this is a long way to get to the question is, there's people that do certain things and it seems to come natural. It's a motivation that comes naturally. Few people can pass that on to somebody else, specifically, a child. It's, that's a big shadow to live under. Barney has obviously taken this thing by the balls and run with it. And it's impressive to see. What part do you think you played in that? How do you think that that's worked out the way that it has? Because it's, from my experience, it's seldomly does it pan out the way it has in your guys' case.
I think there's two things really. One is that my mother, who by the way is 104 years of age, she'll be 105 this October, and I was her number 7. She gave me some good advice. She said, being you, Rob, don't push Barney to be you. Let him decide that he would like to possibly join in with what you do. Great advice. Had I pushed Barney, he wouldn't have possibly made that jump to say, hey, Dad, being a rude chap. He said, not only, Dad, am I going to join what you do, but I'm going to try and make it better than you've done because you're the most useless business person ever in the history of business. I think that was the first thing, not push him. Secondly, we're very different characters. And we've learned to listen to each other. And sometimes it's really irritating as a father to have to listen to somebody who's going to make the same mistakes that you make, and but you've got to shut up. Or it's really, really irritating for a son that's a father's like a bulldozer, always like pushing forward and that type of person, to actually stand back and say, okay, Dad might be really annoying, but maybe he's got a point here. So listening enabled us to be friends. Yeah. And sometimes it's damn difficult to be a son, and sometimes it's damn difficult, as you well know, to be a father. But you can overcome that by trying to listen. Twice that Barney has had to step up for his father, twice in 2 years, in an area which I've never failed in. I failed at everything, but never reaching the pole. So first is when my real hip disintegrates, 300 miles out. He's going to continue into hell, and he's never done it before, with a couple of great people, but he's still got to do it himself. And I'm not there to support him or to look after him. I'd come up with some big speech about saying, failure equals death, but I had to fail. And I think that has a lot to do with trust. And I trusted that he could make it, that he had the guts to make it, he had the skills to make it, and I felt that I'd passed on as much as I possibly could to help him do that. And he did it himself, not me. Right. But he got there. The first ever renewable energy expedition ever to any pole, all on the sun. Fantastic job. And he said to me, Dad, there's no ways I'm doing that last 300 miles with you. You're completely insane. Go off and do it. I'll come and join you. 60 miles out from the pole, he said, I'll come and join you, but I'm not doing the whole 300. He's not stupid like me. Right. So, I get 40 miles out from finishing the journey, and suddenly Barney's leading a whole lot of sponsors and great supporters of ours who paid a stat load of money to come and finish the journey with the great Rob Swan, and I'm not there. I'm in hospital without a hip. So Barney has to again step up, fly in with all these extraordinarily brilliant and great people, but I'm not there. And they paid a stat load of money to kind of finish the journey with me. But Barney steps up and actually did such a good job that no one even noticed I wasn't there. So I think a lot has to do with trust. And I think people who follow in their footsteps of their parents have to be given the flexibility to find their own path within that path. So Barney has his own path. He has, we might put it at the end of the podcast, Climate Force, all one word, climateforce.com. He's got this mission about solutions to some of the issues that we face for our survival on the planet, but mainly directed to young people. So he's got his own mission within the mission. And I think that has really, truly inspired him to take this and move it forward without living in my shadow. Yeah. And actually he's doing such a damn good job that I feel I'm living in his shadow, actually. Yeah. So it's a good moment, JT, to feel that.
Yeah. I mean, that is at the end our goal, right? Is to see our kids go on and do something just as good, if not better, than we do. I don't want to take any more of your time up. I really appreciate you coming on, and I want to make sure that we get this out there. It's going to be anyone who's interested on what Robert is doing, what the motivation behind it is, what are the goals to support it. Please check out 2041.com. They'll see the number on your shirt as well. Please check out climateforce.com to see what Barney Swan is also doing and some of what he's all about. Robert, do you have
And
anything?
I'd like to finish off, JT, by saying a couple of things that matter, I think, in all of this. Is that I've tried to live by a few rules, a few habits that sometimes are good, sometimes are bad. But I always try and look, people are always going on about what's wrong. What's wrong? I try and not look at what's wrong. I try and look what's missing. And I think in our world today, what's missing is that we're starting to not have trust in anybody.
Yeah.
Whether it be leaders, whether it be corporations, whether it be governors, whether it be whatever it is, we're losing trust. And I think without trust, we have nothing. So I would say to people, try and regain trust. And one of the ways of regaining trust is to trust yourself. Because if you don't trust yourself, how are other people going to trust you? And I think that's an important thing to say. And the last thing I want to say is that people might look at me and say, well, it's all right for him. Rob Swan, the first person in history to walk to both poles, north and south, blah, blah, blah. It's okay for him. But let me tell you, I've had some pretty bottom times in my life. After walking to both poles, JT, and I don't mind saying this, but I was so empty that for, I don't know, 3 years or something, I looked for a solution at the bottom of a bottle of wine.
Yeah.
And I don't think I was an alcoholic, but I was definitely dominated by hiding in alcohol for a while. And one day, thank goodness, I woke up and I was bored with it, and I've never had a drop to drink for 20 something years. But trust me, I have faced rough times as much as anybody, not walking to the pole or that stuff, but personally, being such a driven person, often, JT, possibly I've not been as happy as a human being as I should be. And Barney reminds me of that. Come on, Dad, be a bit happier. Yeah. Stop pushing all the time. So I just wanted to leave our great conversation by saying I'm not some super person. But I just feel that I do believe that it's possible to have some freedom, to live a life that's possibly a bit different than other people's lives, but it doesn't come without some battle. So I want to thank you for doing what you're doing and inspiring people, and good stuff by you. You're doing possibly what more people should be doing right now.
Yeah, and I think I appreciate that. I think one of the themes I've seen just from talking to you is having an honest conversation with yourself. So you can say, hey, I'm not an organized person. So these are the things I need to work on, right? Or, hey, I'm escaping into a bottle of alcohol or wine because I'm not happy. And I think that happens to a lot of people when they set, because there's a difference to me in there's habits and there's goals. And you can have temporary habits to achieve a goal, but when that's gone, you're left with an empty feeling of now what? And it's always on to the next challenge. What is the next challenge? What is the next thing? And to find peace and calm in just being okay to be still with yourself and not chasing something is a really difficult thing to do. And I think that's one of the things, and I'm certainly not one to claim to know how to do it, but it's something I enjoy talking to other people about and about their process and about their journey. So I really appreciate you just being vulnerable and there's something to be said about people we can look up to, but at the same time, those people can say, hey, I have issues here. I struggle here. I'm human just like you. There's not an S on my chest. So I very much appreciate that, and I think a lot of the listeners will as well.
Well, thanks, old boy. Good luck with everything, and thanks to anybody who's listening. Good luck, be safe, and live those dreams. Thanks a lot,
right,
JT.
Thank you very much. That's it from us. Please make sure you leave a comment. I think I have one comment. Please leave a comment. Good or bad, I don't care. I can use the criticism. This whole thing's just starting. But thanks again to Robert Swan for taking the time to sit down with us and sharing his story. It means a lot. Make sure you check out 2041.com. Support what he's doing. I mean, Jesus, he's trying to save the planet, people. It doesn't get any better than that. Check out what his son is doing, Barney Swan, at climateforce.com. Again, an awesome cause with the end same goal of trying to keep this place around a little bit longer. That's it from us at the Consequence of Habit podcast. See you next time.